If data is going to be the fuel that makes these algorithms smarter and everything, so there's a new fight for your data then.
Yes, but this is a very interesting thing. So if you see when the profession changed to cars, obviously they were out of jobs. But again, in a larger scale, the number of jobs, the number of cars, everything increased. The way you will solve it and the intelligent components that you will use will be very different from the way I do it. The method may be same, but the intelligence quotient that we use will be different. So
do I adopt Gen AI in my general use case, in my product, in my solution, right? How do they go about doing this? Evolution is slow and complex but spectacular.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
I think the real fear is that AI will sort of brute force to a degree where there will be real costs on society. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Startup Operator Podcast. I am Roshan Karyappa. We've spoken about Gen AI or generative AI on multiple episodes and roundups before. I'm really curious to understand what the hell is happening. So today we have Shubo, who's the co-founder of Neuralgarage, a Gen AI startup that is solving some very interesting challenges in the media and entertainment industry. So I speak to Shubo about what's going on under the hood, how these algorithms are getting smarter and better every day, its potential impact, and how you can find real tangible use cases in this domain. Shubo is an experienced entrepreneur. He's built and sold a company before this. So it was really fascinating to talk to him about a bunch of this stuff. So if you're mildly interested in anything to do with AI, this is a fascinating 101. So I hope you like this. Hey Shubo, welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, Roshan, for inviting me here. Really excited to see how the conversation goes.
Awesome. So, we've talked a ton about Gen AI on the podcast, both on the episodes and the roundup. It's nice to actually have a Gen AI startup on the podcast. So we'll talk about, what's under the hood, the potential, the possibilities, and how you can find a real use case and actually make some money out of all of this, right? So, yeah, I'm really excited about all of this stuff that we're going to talk about. So, but first, I want to start with the potential of Gen AI, right? I mean, everyone has a vague idea, tending to the extremes in terms of what it can and cannot do. If you can lay out the contours of, what is possible with Gen AI.
Yes, so there are a lot of interesting, things we can do. Basically creating new content. See, in actuality, what we have been able to do in research, there was a 2017 research paper which started all this called "Attention is all you need," and based on the modules there, transformers.
That's a pretty cool name for a paper, right?
It's also my WhatsApp status. So it's very interesting, and all these models that are right now being built have been built using these attention mechanisms with other things in place. So what generative AI can essentially do is predict the next word or next token with very high context. Now, what it means for text is when you, let's say, type a question or you ask, let's say, to fill in the blanks, something like that, then it can give you very accurate answers by predicting the next word. And every time it predicts the next word, it adds that word also to the list of the question, and now it predicts again. So these are called auto-regressive models. When it comes to images, again, if it generates, let's say, it is trying to generate the face of a human, if it generates this part would also be taken into consideration while generating this part. So again, context. If it's videos, again, if you generate one frame, the next frame would also be in context with the previous frame. So these are essentially right now the applications. So what you can do is you can create videos, you can create different interesting texts, have a question answers module. What you couldn't and shouldn't do is expect an actual intelligent entity to which can replace or which is replacing humans. That would be a wrong thing to do right now because the capability does not exist.
Right. If we can just look a little under the hood, right? I mean, you had the classic case of programming by business logic, right? Which is zeros and ones, like program a set of rules, and in case the rules are like binary, if it works, it if it is one, I mean it is true and so on, right?
Yeah.
Then you had machine learning, which is basically learning from data. How is Gen AI different from what has come before?
So if you think about the progression in how of a kid or a baby learns, it's very similar to this actually. When we are small, we first try to recognize faces, right? I'll just give a particular example for generative AI for images. We first try to recognize faces of humans, and then what we do is we recognize faces of ye mummy hai, papa hai, my mom, my dad, specific faces.
You associate context with that.
Yes. So that becomes face recognition. Now, if the baby has seen a lot of images of humans and he's really talented, you can now draw faces or create faces. Now, this is based on his knowledge and complexity or intelligence. He can become an artist. This is what generative AI essentially is. If you can do very good predictions, if you can absorb a lot of information from the data, you also have the capability to recreate data. So this is essentially, in a nutshell, what generative AI is capable of. Similar to all the LLMs right now, which are there, they have been trained on all the data that is there on the internet, almost the open source data. So they know very well how to complete a sentence, how to construct a sentence. Hence, they can answer or do those things very easily.
Right. What are these large language models, or LLMs as they call them, right? Again, from a very 101 perspective for a layperson, what do these LLMs do?
So when it started, if I look back, I think in early 2000s, there was something called n-gram models, where especially when you're talking about language, our words are always dependent on what we said before, right? Because of this context. So there used to be n-gram models where the nth word used to be dependent on the last n minus one words.
word.
But the context was not that well established. Then came other neural network structures like LSTMs, recurrent neural networks.
RNNs.
Yes, RNNs. But again, they were also limited by context. But then, like I said before, this paper got released, attention is all you need. And then you could focus on specific words in a sentence. So for example, let's say you are at a local train, right? And you're speaking to your friend and he says something to you. You can actually eliminate the noise that is there while everyone is speaking and hear the actual words that your friend is saying, right? So you're focusing your attention on your friend. So you can think of this as an abstraction to what attention can do. It can establish important relationship of each word connected to the other words in a sentence. And because it can do this, it can also do this while it is answering you. So that changed everything. And after that, BERT and General Pre-trained Transformer, all this got released. So Transformer is one module which extensively uses this thing called attention. And in 2000, I think 19 around, they realized that a lot of compute is available, a lot of data is available. And if we can expand and blow up these two, we can have very interesting answers. So, but the major breakthrough was done in 2017. Basis which these large language models have evolved. And now you're seeing small language models because what they're realizing is that someone who knows everything and is very generalized essentially means he's bad in every specific use case.
Less useful.
Yes.
Than someone who specializes in one thing.
Yes. So now you're having, the evolution of small language models.
Right. So trained on very, finite data sets. When I say finite, I mean like, domain related or a particular subject related and so on.
So I would say fine-tuned because to learn the basics or constructs of language, they initially have to be trained on a larger data set to understand how English and how words can be placed in context with each other. After that, they are fine-tuned on specific data set. For example, let's say for e-commerce or legal or finance, etc.
So one of the things I find fascinating is not just that, relation between words and context, right? I mean, also the algorithm somehow understanding the hierarchy of meanings, hierarchy of values and so on and so forth, right? Now the both of us are speaking to each other. How important is it that there is a sound dampener there, right? I mean, to the context of what we're speaking, for instance, right? Whereas, I mean, and it'll have a weighted proportion in terms of what is more important to this conversation than not, right? So that I find really kind of fascinating.
No, it is, but we should also set our expectations not too high, because very honestly, what we have been able to do.
Marketer, technologist, right? So just a helpful clarification.
Yeah. I mean, the mission is important, because that
Yeah.
sets, what you build. But right now, there is no planning component. For example, when when what I'm telling you, what I'm speaking right now, there's some level of planning which is there in my head, right? And then I'm speaking it and converting it into language, which is English here. So this is not something LLMs do. They have no persistence, that is retaining of information, and they also do not have any planning component. So they are so. Recently at a conference, I said this. So we have, we are kind of overestimating AI right now, but also we underestimated what predicting the next word will allow us to do. Because right now, things which LLMs can do is really not something we could estimate. There are specific models which you can have in GPT-4, where you could, have an entire presentation or even generate what I can say in this podcast, things
Right.
like that.
Right.
But again, there has to be a human intervention at the moment. It cannot be automated.
Right. I think, I don't know if it's Bill Gates or someone else who had this quote, right? I mean, we overestimate what we can do in 10 years and we underestimate what we can do in 1 year from now.
Yeah.
Something of that sort. So, speaking of, how far are we from general intelligence?
So I actually don't think there is anything called a general intelligence.
Okay.
For example, let's say that both of us are solving one particular problem and both of us have the same domain expertise. The way you will solve it and the intelligent components that you will use will be very different from the way I do it. The method may be same, but the intelligence quotient that we use will be different. So I don't think there is anything called a generalized intelligence. There may be specific ways in which not just language models, but normal AI can compete with us, but it won't be, a generalized set of intelligence. The reason I say this, for example, let's go back 20 years, right? What we first thought would be the first AI that we see will be kind of robots that you see in Terminator movies. But that didn't happen. AI actually solved things which we thought were very special to us, like, for example, playing chess,
Right.
or creating very interesting storylines.
Right.
Even now, if you, and I heard this recently in a podcast of Lex Fridman, if you ask an AI to actually clean this table, right, it's going to take a lot of data, a lot of understanding for it to understand what exactly do I mean by that. You say to a 10-year-old, he'll learn it in minutes. Right. So it's still far away from that. Having said that, I think AI ultimately will go towards an intelligence which would be different from human intelligence. It won't be, similar to what AGI is.
Right. Yeah, I think, all of this merits a deeper introspection into what intelligence is itself, right?
Yes.
I mean, and I feel it's far more complex than can be measured by simple IQ tests or whatever of that sort, right? I think basically most of these tests measure unintelligence, right?
Yeah.
Which is...
That's a very good point, yes.
Yeah. To basically say that, hey, one can't do this, right? But the possibilities itself are infinite, actually.
Yeah, and if you think about the way that AI is right now learning, it is only learning through text. Even the images and videos that is fed into it is converted in sort of a textual manner. And imagine if, all our sensory inputs were dumbed down and we were only fed textual inputs, how much would we be able to learn and function?
Yeah.
How much intelligent can we get? Right.
And of course, I mean, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution as well, right? I mean, the number of people that we've been through to get to where we are right now. But then why do all these guys start sounding the alarm bells, man? I mean, whether it is Elon Musk or Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil has been saying this for 20 years, I think, right? So why do you think that is?
So I have a lot of respect for all these people that's there. But if you go deeper in the AI community, people who are right now, let's say, are more closer to AI. For example, head of research at Facebook, Jan LeCun, or you take Andrew Ng, they'll still tell you it is very far for even a dog-like intelligence. Forget human-like. Right? It will take still a lot of time. Having said that, what I think Elon Musk and others fear is that if it is solved, it may be very far, but if it is solved, what can be the consequences of it? It will not be able to control it. Probably that is one fear, that is there in their minds, which help them say it, or they may have access to information which we don't have.
Right.
That can also be something that's possible.
Right. I think one of the fears is that it's not a linear trajectory, right? I mean, technology leaps in general are exponential, right? It's not something that is an even curve on the slope, right? So yeah, I mean, they fear that we don't have adequate information to predict how it will be, and so the first thing is to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's it's going to be interesting times
Yeah,
for
because
sure.
one thing that is there for sure is that the data rate at which, let's say the models which are there now, LLMs, the data rate at which they can learn is very fast. We cannot learn that fast, right? Even if we read a book, we'll not be able. It will take us, I think, hundreds of thousands of years to learn what LLMs have been able to learn. So if something is solved, in which they can have a multimodal data, you can understand videos as in there is, they can have inputs to sensory, they can learn very fast. And then what they do with that information, that is something I think people are,
Yeah.
little thoughtful about.
Yeah, I mean, evolution is slow
Yeah,
and complex but spectacular,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
I think the real fear is that AI will sort of brute force to a degree where there will be real costs on society from various perspectives, right? I mean, just from a cultural or economic perspective as well, right? I mean, we often talk about driverless cars, for instance. Now, driving is one of the most
Right.
common professions in the world,
Yeah.
right? In fact, you barely have to be literate even to
Yes.
kind of know how to drive, and it's a reasonable occupation, right? I mean, imagine all of those millions of people out of
Yeah.
jobs, and so on, right? I know, I mean, it won't happen right away. It won't happen maybe in 5 years, but it's tending towards that, right? So
But you can think of it this, a friend of mine actually told me this. So earlier in Britain, there was this committee which was set up who were deciding, that time there were no cars, it was mainly horse carts. So they were deciding what to do if there are too many horses. There will be a lot of horse shit around the town.
Right.
So how to manage that, right? So if you see when the profession changed to cars, obviously they were out of jobs. But again, in a larger scale, the number of jobs, the number of cars, everything increased. So I see AI also like that. Maybe the nature of job will change. And earlier, let's say, what our driver's profession was, it might change a bit. Maybe there'll be controllers who can control multiple cars at the same time. Similar for story artists and content creators. Maybe AI will enable them to create things much more faster. So the nature of jobs will change,
Yeah.
like what internet did, right? But I don't think that it will replace humans.
Yeah. No, I'm an eternal optimist with respect to these things, right? I mean, I feel like we will find a way to solve things and move humanity forward, right, within realms. I don't know if there's another way to think about these things, right? This whole AI race is sort of heating up, right? I mean, China has its own investments, and then you have OpenAI and Mistral and like Gemini lesser said the better, but
Yeah.
all of these things, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so who is doing what right now? What are all of these folks investing in?
I think it's mainly chips directly, which will optimize the entire flow. Right now, the bottleneck that there is the compute. There's obviously a shortage of compute all over the world because, like you said, it's a AI war, and Nvidia is only the one with arms,
Yeah.
and hence there's a shortage right now. H100s are currently the state of the arts, which are available for current usage. But in India, it's been very difficult to even get those. Recently, I was speaking to someone from Bharat's GPT, the Hanuman GPT, which they're building. I think they have been able to get 15 of them. But still, I mean, a large set is remaining.
Right.
But in general, what OpenAI has been proposing is that it's open for use for everybody, but we'll not make our models everything public. As compared to, for example, Facebook, who again have a very large set of H100s, but they want to make it open source via their Facebook AI research.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, both of them have their own positives and negatives. I mean, open source is important, but again, if you put very strong things in hands of people, it's very difficult to regulate them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be a whole lot of, I mean, I don't want to call it war, but some kind of a battle of sorts for data, right? I mean, they called data as the new oil. They said data is the new oil about 15 years back. It was on every consultant's slide deck, right? I don't know what it is right now. I mean, it's probably the new platinum or zirconium or whatever one of those elements are, right? I mean, that's precious. Yeah, because again, if data is going to be the fuel that makes these algorithms smarter and everything, so there's a new fight for your data then.
Yes, but this is a very interesting thing. So, the reason I also believe that LLMs first release, that is language models, is because the amount of text data that is available, it has been there, since the 90s, right? Then came image data. And right now, because of all the content creators and podcasters,
Of course.
yes, you have a lot of video data as well.
Right.
So the amount of video data that I think would be required for something to be done in video, it would still take time. But again, the information forums like Reddit, for example, uh, they help a lot when it comes to data, and all of the models have been trained a lot on open data that is available. But the laws will also direct this. For example, I think the laws in the European system, they prohibit usage of that data, whereas there are other systems which enable usage of their data. And companies also have very interesting perspectives here. For example, Facebook does open source their algorithms, but the things they have there at their end is data, and it's always incomplete. A model is like a combination of intelligence and wisdom. The wisdom always comes from the data, and you can be as intelligent as you want, but without the data, it's really nothing.
True.
Yeah, so there will definitely be a race, and companies which already have a lot of data, who enable free usage for us, like Google, Facebook, but they can. I mean, there's always this clause that they can use this for research and development purposes, for helping us.
R&D.
Yes, R&D. That's always there, but they'll have an edge over this. That is definitely there.
Right. So, for the founders who are listening to this, right, and are thinking that, great, all this sounds pretty amazing. How do I adopt Gen AI in my general use case, in my product, in my solution, right? How do they go about doing this?
First, I think everything should start from the necessity or the need. If you right now look at the tools and then you try to map it to the needs, it will be more difficult. If you see, there are certain bottlenecks which are there right now. For example, if you see there's you want to, let's say, publish your content, the images, for example, in your content creative with a higher frequency, but right now you're limited by that, for example. If that is a problem, then you can look at current tools which are available. That will always help. And the second part is always have a human there right now, because accuracy right now, it is not absolute. There needs to be augmentation rather than replacement, which can handle this. One person, I mean, they call them prompt engineers now, but one person with the knowledge in that domain, someone, let's say, who used to create those creatives, with some learning, they can definitely right now up their game and do a lot.
Right.
So first, I think you should start with what are the problems that are there, then map it to solutions rather than going the other way.
Yeah. No, I think perhaps, I mean, the first starting step would be how you can extend your solutions capabilities, somewhat linearly with Gen AI, right? And then think about radically like revisiting some of the ways that you're solving the problem itself, right?
Yes. So, for example, there's certain kind of jobs where you need to have a lot of domain-specific knowledge. And when, let's say, I am a newcomer or someone who does not have that knowledge, but my job role requires me to learn a lot, generative AI can be very useful. For example, if I have to create a presentation on something I don't know anything about, generative AI can make me a leveler and get me up to certain level. Of course, I need some expertise to up that game, but I think it can be very useful for being an assistant. Ideally, yeah.
Pretty. So one of the things also is that whenever we talk to deep tech folks and so on, right? I mean, they're just so hung up over the technology itself, because I think obviously these guys are engineers, geeks, nerds, whatever you call them, right? I mean, they get their kicks from the way it works itself, right?
Yeah.
But finding like relevant, real, practical use cases that offer a tangible business outcome is often very rare, right? For every one person who does, I mean, there are 100 others who are just like in the hype of the technology itself, right? This is your second time around, right? Not your first time at the rodeo, right? And you've been executing on this for you've been building in deep tech for 6-7 years now.
Yeah.
So what is your advice to people in terms of how they can find a paying use case?
I think what is most important is to have a combination of a top-down and a bottom-up approach. Because, for example, if you talk to a marketer, the normal way he thinks is a top-down approach. This is a problem, and this is how I get a solution to that. But when you have a developer or a deep tech guy, because he's so close to the solution, he'll always have this bottom-up thinking, right? How do I build it, and then how do I, separately sell it? But there has to be a feedback loop from the customer. If you can actually find a use case directly speaking to customers and their pain points, I've seen it always helps. It is right now, I mean, most of people that I see, like you said, in general, they are solutions looking for problems, and they don't last for too long, very honestly, because if you are trying to find a problem, then you will be limited to a very small set of people, and you always want to rehear, or you'll have a confirmation bias, and that sets you in the wrong path. So I mean, always be cognizant of the fact that you may be building something which no one wants. Just need to change a little bit, because from a technical standpoint, it doesn't take too much to change. But don't be too attached to the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's definitely useful. All right. So we spent a lot of time giving context to people about Gen AI and the various possibilities and so on. Let's talk about Neuralgarage, right? Pretty cool name, by the way.
Thank you.
What does Neuralgarage do? And yeah, if you can talk about your 0 to 1 journey, how that has been, how did you go from idea to product to company?
Sure. So Neuralgarage essentially was formed keeping in mind for building a solution in the media and entertainment industry. And the reason it was formed, because one of our co-founders, Anjan, so he likes consuming Korean content. And that went up very much during the COVID times.
Of course.
Yes. And in the last startup, we had acquired skills about, this is early, I think 2018, where we could recreate people's faces. Because so my last startup was essentially a facial recognition startup.
Visage Map.
Right? Yes, and that was acquired by another company called Face First, a US-based company. And there were a lot of privacy laws in US where you couldn't train with normal people's data that you are acquiring. So we had to create our own data to train. So that is where we got our generative AI skills. And having gotten those skills, when Anjan was facing this problem, so we kind of discussed about it, that we right now have the artillery in our arsenal, but how do we actually make this? Because in dubbed content, there's one big problem that is always there. That is what you speak, and what people hear, they are always different. For example, a money heist, the professor speaks in Spanish, but you hear him in English or Hindi based on your language. So Neuralgarage was formed to solve that problem. And if you think about it, we change the jaw, lip movements, everything of the actor. But we do it with sound as a controller. And the context I gave with respect to my last startup was because whilst we are generating faces, here we are generating this part. But second is, it is on a video and it is controlled by audio. So that is how we acquired the skills. We did some, roundabout about the open source things which are available that time. But it was nothing which matched the actual quality. So it was not indistinguishable from the original content. And we knew these are actors that we are talking about. It has to be that. So we decided that, look, let's build something. So we quit our last company, and then Neuralgarage was formed. And since then, we have built this product called VisualDub, which right now is used in advertisements primarily. We have not yet done an OTT project, which we will this year, very soon. But yeah, all global brands, around 14 of them, like Amazon, Coca-Cola, etc., are using this technology to make their content seamless in other languages.
Man, it's pretty cool. I saw the Shah Rukh Khan video, of course, and I saw a bunch of videos on their website as well. If you guys want to see Kevin Spacey speak like flawless Hindi, you head over to visualdub.com.ai.
Yeah, both of them are there, yeah.
Right. One of those, and you'll be able to see that. But there are so many of these technical nuances to that, right? I mean, one thing is the visual, which you mentioned, which is that recreating the face, jaw, and so on and so forth. But like accents, for example, right? Now, Kevin Spacey speaking Hindi, I mean, okay, fine. I think people will sort of, forgive him for having a different sort of an accent. But let's take the case of, I'm watching Poacher on, Prime, right? Which is a series. And there are 5 options for me, from Kannada to Malayalam to Hindi and whatnot, right? Now, how do you manage accents in these cases?
So the way we have trained our algorithm, so I'll get into a little deep here.
Yeah, please.
So we use something, which Disney used to do in very earlier days. So they used to do something called a phoneme to a viseme map. So when we speak words, if you break it down into smaller segments, you get what is called as a phonetic. And these phonetics have very unique lip movements. For example, if I say the word poacher, right, at P, I have to close my lips. And if I say the word papa, again at P, I have to close my lips. So these lip movements are called visemes, and they have unique mapping. So we have actually learned this mapping. So we are not limited by language or accent, right? So if in a particular accent you say pa, and in another accent you say pa, these two are different sounds for us.
Oh, okay.
And because sound is the controller, it will change the lip movements accordingly.
Right.
So right now, because we have never had Kevin Spacey actually speak Hindi, the way the algorithm works is, in a nutshell, it is a combination of how Kevin Spacey speaks English and how people generally speak Hindi. So
Got
this
it.
is, and you can adjust it as per your requirement. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. So the way you've built the product and also the company itself, right? I mean, you've based it on a single domain, let's say media and entertainment, and you've decided to like use Gen AI to kind of solve the problems in that industry, right? And so VisualDub is one of them, right? But otherwise, how are you identifying problems that you could solve in this industry?
So I think it's very important to choose your vertical because one is the way in which the world is evolving. There would always be open source models which do very good generalized work. The second is that you want to have a very good command in one particular industry. You will be paid only well if you do your work very well, right? Unless you have a very high level of accuracy, after some time you'll be replaced. So I think instead of a generalized solution, choosing a vertical solution is important.
Yeah.
And
I think that's in general, right? I mean, even for SaaS also, what I notice is all the horizontal SaaS guys are getting commoditized like hell. Right? There's huge pricing pressure and whatnot. And the only moat going forward is some kind of verticalization, right? So which is building domain knowledge.
Right.
And actually offering like a consultative solution than like a quick plugin or fix or whatever.
Yeah. So because those things have fast adaptability, but also people move on fast. Right. And especially when it comes to AI, the learning curve is still being established. Right now, AI SaaS is still, I think, being is a kind of evolving thing. At least when it comes to generative AI, you need a person there, who can actually use it and do it. And coming back to your previous question, one thing I think I wanted to mention was that when we choose our use cases, we try to at Neuralgarage choose use cases which cannot be done by humans. For example, Kevin Spacey can't speak Hindi. Right? We could have added other things in our stack. For example, dubbing is a use case also which can be solved by AI, and a lot of startups are doing it. But when you do something like that, you have to compete with two things. One is the way it is right now being done, which is by humans. So you have to do it either faster or you have to do it cheap. What we tend to do with the products at Neuralgarage is expand human capabilities, because that is something that will give you a very access to a very niche market. Because if you have to actually make, let's say, Tom Cruise speak in Bihari, you have to get him to reshoot that. Right. And the production costs in some cases will be huge and also not possible. Right now, we are in talks with some production houses, in fact, in the country, where if we are able to make the cut, then they'll not make the actors reshoot. Otherwise, the actors will act 3 times, each for a language. So imagine the cost there.
Yeah, huge cost savings, right? How are you growing the business at this point?
So one thing, because it's a new category, visual dubbing, we decided internally that we will work with large companies at first, because they may be longer initial cycles where they accept you, but once they do, you have made the cut. Because we know that even if we right now, let's say, for example, for digital quality lip sync which we provide, our software could have solved it many months before. But the reason that we aim for a TV or a 4K quality is because we want to stay there in the market for a very long time. And right now, 14 global brands have adopted us. This year also, we intend to choose a very unique OTT project or a few movies which will set us in the right direction. And when you do these type of projects, you have an automatic adoption pull, because if they can make a higher cut, then again, this will be adopted very easily by others. So very interesting story. First, when we were working with one of the largest brands in the world, actually. So their India version, initially they were testing us for about 3-4 months. And we were supposed to deliver 5 units. And the moment it got cleared, it became 40 units. And we were not anticipating that. And I think the founders left 4 hours in 5 days total that time. But that learning that we got, in a set of days, that was massive, because we had highly underestimated the quality that they'll be seeking. They had language experts evaluate this. They had shown before and after with the original this and that. But that set us in the right direction. And I think for an AI startup, especially a generative AI startup, you have to be very cognizant about accuracy, because
Right.
if you can solve for that, you are looking at immediate adoption.
Right. What's the general impact of Gen AI on the entertainment industry? I mean, how far away from, let me saying that I need another season of Breaking Bad? This time cast, Shubo as the, as the new meth dealer or something.
Uh, that is a very honestly difficult answer. I mean, how far are we there? But one thing that is there is that every person in the industry, the entire value chain, everyone is making use of generative AI in some form or the other. Whether it is writers, whether it is conceptualizers. When I mean by conceptualization is that, for example, you have thought of a movie scene where there's going to be a battle. And right now you have startups where they can actually create those battle scenes, and you can imagine, and the director can directly look at them and choose to do this in this way or choose a different
Wow.
way to do the battle. So, and again, then you fast forward it to, let's say, production houses, right? They can definitely use dubbing startups, visual dubbing startups to create multiple IPs from one IP. So everyone in the chain is using it, but for what you asked, for a new Breaking Bad series, it has to be a collective
Right.
use overall. Still, that is not there, because if you see even AI voice right now, it still lacks some emotion. You can figure it out. Unless you are replacing one word or two words, if it's a larger sentence, you can figure it out. Even in video cases, let's say the best text to video model right now, at least in the open, is Sora. And in open source is Levy. But if you see them, you don't have much control over them, right? You can generate some interesting storylines, but recreating an exact scene, that will be something that still has to be done.
I'm still gonna have to wait for the next episode, next series of next season of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Um, we spoke about entertainment and AI's impact on entertainment, right? I mean, here I feel India is kind of acutely positioned as well, because we do a lot of the back end work for some of the Hollywood folks anyway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a huge amount of that is outsourced to India,
Yes.
right? Where are we in terms of AI competitiveness, right? We've seen, obviously, US is in the hands of these 2 3 large corporations. China has a state policy towards investing in AI and so on. India is kind of finding its foot right now, right? The only great thing that we have is we have the largest number of developers, not necessarily AI developers, but largest number of developers in the world, right? So in terms of just being able to compete, right? Where are we right now, and what will it take for us to become truly, global, competitive, and so on?
I actually think that India has a lot of potential with generative AI, and the main reason is that if you look at, let's say, last 10 years, right, where AI had made a revolution with things like facial detection, recognition, action recognition, things like that. The products there in India were not that much, and the main reason is we face this with our last startup, that if we set up a face recognition system in Big Bazaar, uh, it won't be that effective, because he'll make another person stand and look after someone is stealing or not.
Got it.
Because labor is relatively cheaper in India. But if you go to US, that time it made a lot of sense, because it's very expensive to have anyone look after your things. So they used to use these algorithms. But when it comes to generative AI, I think India has a very unique edge, because one, it is a multilingual country. Second is we are very high in services, and because AI right now, generative AI right now, the place where we are now is it can enable one services person to enhance his skills. It is still not replacing humans, right? So because of that one to many mapping that we have in India, I think because even if you read the most amount of money which was made in generative AI was by Accenture.
Accenture.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy, right? Two and a
Yeah.
half billion or something
Yeah, because
for the year.
yes, because in case of AI, it is still primarily software and services. And if you have a services person, he can highly upgrade his skills, right? So I think India is very uniquely positioned. Even China also. US, I'm not very sure, but the regulations in India are also a little founder friendly right now. There are certain regulations outside which might prohibit AI, at least for startups. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. So policy and I mean regulation, right? I mean, I think that's like a whole other topic, right, on AI, because obviously there are safety issues.
Yeah.
Obviously the undue influence it can have on things like elections, for
Yes.
example, and so on and so forth, right? I mean, I find myself staring at a blank page when I think about, what could be a potential policy guideline, right? I mean, how do you even define guardrails for something as all pervasive as AI, right? I mean, the Biden government, I think, had issued, like a 10-point or 15-point
It's
sort of
like
a
commandments. Yeah.
checklist. I mean, it's crazy, ridiculous, right? It's almost like just short of saying show us the AI, right? I mean, show where it is like running and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, how do you think about policy with respect to AI?
So I think I'll give two parts answer to this. One is initially when AI is coming right now into the picture, people right now will make certain mistakes, and there will be these fake videos which have come out, right? But after a few years, when if this becomes a norm and more videos come out, people are just going to recognize, because if you see the last larger segment, it was Photoshop images, right? Now people know which is wrong, which is right. They don't have a problem. Similar will happen with videos. Videos is still an evolving category. One new challenge that has happened is earlier people who can do very good photoshops and make very controversial images, it was limited to a few people. But now, due to open source models, even developers can do that, and some
Yeah.
of them might not have that level of accountability to do that. So how governments look at that is a very difficult question, because if you limit open source, you're limiting research in some manner. But I think ultimately it will settle down to something which is a C2PA certification, which something like if you put out an AI system, you can track the history of it being through an AI. So if, let's say, I have created a VisualDub video and it goes through one post-production house. So the first layer says, this has been generated by VisualDub.ai. Then the post-production studio adds another layer. And then if it goes on Instagram, again, you can say goes through Instagram. So there's an entire history which
Right.
is associated with it. So you know what is a fake video and what is a real video.
Yeah.
But controlling mischief, that is a very difficult question.
Yeah.
Because then you have to restrict open source models, which again we will get a big pushback from the academic community
Yeah.
for that.
No, it's hard, right? I mean, because I think broadly, if you look at the world, the way they're dealing with this, the US has pretty much relegated it to all of these big corporations, right? I
Yeah.
mean, with the Googles and Microsofts of the world, to figure out, what is the best way to sort of regulate this. And then if you look at Europe, I mean, they always like prefer regulation
Yeah.
to innovation, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they don't care if it stifles innovation, but they prioritize safety, security, all
Yeah.
of those things first, right? India, I think, is trying to find its footing in that respect, right? I mean, given the scale and complexity of India, we tend to first ban things and then make exceptions, right? So there was this law that was mooted, I think, saying that if you're using an AI model or something, you have to disclose this and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. And there was a huge uproar in the startup ecosystem. A bunch of people made a fuss, and then the government has come and clarified, saying
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
aisa kuch nahi hai,
Yeah, it's
right?
only for large companies.
Right.
I think it was caused mainly by the answers Gemini was giving.
Right.
Yes, but again, so ideally we don't want a regulation to be reactive.
Yeah.
We want that it to be planned from before.
Yeah.
So NASSCOM, which is a trade association in India, they are doing very good work in this. They try to be uh, an intermediary between us and the government, keeping us appraised about the laws which are coming, also the way the laws should be made. There have been multiple forums where they have made us engage with ministers in the government, which they try to understand what are the consequences of it. Because see, certain segments, definitely I do anticipate there would be regulations. For example, finance, legal, healthcare. These are very sensitive segments because the
Yeah.
cost of a mistake is high.
Yeah.
Right. Certain segments, like the way we are in media, the cost of a mistake is not that high. It's important, obviously, but not that high. So certain segments, I think, will go through regulations. But till now, as much as I'm aware of, India doesn't want to stifle progress from startups. They're
Yeah.
more encouraging, and I believe that that stance will stay. Because I remember one audience with uh, DASCOM, which was representing India, while they wanted to understand the India landscape. So they did a survey with McKinsey, and someone from their side said, we don't want to make the mistake we did with crypto." So that was very refreshing. So I think, yeah, they have planned it out well. They're trying to understand the ecosystem,
Right.
but they don't want to stifle innovation.
Right. So for all the developers who are listening, right? I mean, engineers do listen to some of our podcasts, right? How should they embrace AI in whatever they're doing, right? I mean, actually, let's not limit it to engineers. In general, if I'm a young person and I'm looking at another 30 years of career, professional career, right? How will AI transform my career, and what are those skill sets that I need to develop in order for me to stay ahead?
So I think there are three different categories which people can be divided into. One would be a domain specialist, let's say a creative person. So that person, he doesn't need to look at how to make AI. He just needs to be aware of the tools which are available. And because prompt engineering, or basically AI right now, has come down to what is the best question you can ask so that I can give the best answer for you. So figuring out that best question also takes time. So if you can get appraised with the tools that are available, there are many websites like I think there's a website like there's an AI for that, where you can find all
Okay.
AI tools right now which are available mostly. The second segment being developers. I think Python is a very important language over the years they have become, because the entry to PyTorch or even TensorFlow right now, uh, using or fine tuning models is some skill that would be very important,
Right.
because as verticalized use cases get developed, people even inside the organization, they're going to look for fine tuning on their data, having local models rather than using a generalized off the shelf model. And the third is, if you want to create AI models, that is a big challenge, because right now there's so much information available. Uh, People do not focus, even colleges, so much on the basic principles, right? So certain subjects like mathematics, probability, operations research, optimizations, these are very important subjects. And because of the AI has become so developed now, colleges have introduced very advanced courses, right? It's like learning a sentence even before learning vowels. And once you do that, your ability to create things becomes very difficult, because once you, let's say, being an AI scientist, if you only know how to fine tune models, your only solution is to add layers. You will not think like a true data scientist about how to look at a distribution, things like that. So if you want to really be a truly an AI scientist, and I think the number of these people are going to reduce, we still face problems in hiring. You need to focus on basics first. That is going to help a lot.
Right. So let's switch gears and talk about you as a founder, right? I mean, this is your second time,
Yeah.
as we said earlier, right? I mean, you built and sold a company before. What was that motivation to start another company, go through that same level of anxiety and excitement in equal parts?
Uh, so generally, you kind of forget the problems that you've been through. I mean, seriously, what actually happened?
It's always harder than it seems, right?
Yeah, always, always. So when we started Neuralgarage initially, it was very smooth, because uh, we are very lucky to have a audio visual demo. When I showed you the demo, you immediately understood, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a show and tell, it is very easy to
Seeing is believing.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, connect to startups. So when we pitched to investors, people were immediately they recognized the problem and were happy to. And when we moved fast forward, and we were almost closing our funding, one weird thing happened. So our founder CEO, so he became very sick, and he was in the ICU for about 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and our entire funding got stopped. So our last set of investors, they backed
Shucks.
out, because he was the business guy in the team, and we were the technical guys, right? And because it's media, so you do need a business person to open those doors
Yeah.
for you and understand the problem better. And so we had actually said no to a lot of investors before we were raising because we were oversubscribed. And when this happened, we suddenly were in soup because when a large set of investor backs out, others don't get confidence that because
It's a trickle
we
down
have not
basically.
because you planned for this amount of money,
Yeah.
and they're right also because how will
You
you
need
achieve the
a
targets?
anchor investor
Yes,
basically.
yes, yeah. How will you achieve your targets with only 40% of the money? So one set of investors who were there, they backed us there, and luckily we were able to get new investors in a very short amount of time. I remember my founder having to do a call from the ICU.
Wow.
Yeah. And there were investors who were asking, you can list down your contacts. If you die tomorrow, that will be
Wow.
helpful. So imagine having that conversation because we had sent out offer letters, and all our bank accounts, our credit cards were also exhausted. So it was
Yeah.
I mean, we had difficult times in the first startup, but we couldn't have predicted this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's crazy. It's really crazy. I don't know why people kind of put themselves through it. I think it's like it's just a quirk, I feel.
but in the end, it matters. I mean, after
Yeah.
you've gone through
Oh,
that,
thank God, right? I
yeah,
mean, thank
yeah,
God that you guys put yourself
yeah,
through
yeah,
it, because that's the only way. I mean, there's some kind of innovation that
yes,
we get to
yes. And
experience.
after that, you realize that nothing can impact you, and this
Yeah.
only makes you stronger. If you can
Yeah.
go through those times, everything else seems much more easier. These
Right.
times actually unite the founders more, and made us closer to our current investors, which again helped a lot. So the reason I brought up this story is that when you said you can't anticipate what will happen,
Yeah.
so these ups and downs are always a part of a startup. But
Right.
yeah.
So I feel like at every leg of the journey, right? I mean, a founder has to kind of reinvent themselves. You are not the same person you were at the previous startup, for instance, right? What are those things that you're adding to your arsenal right now to prepare yourself for the next leg of the journey, right? And on that same note, you are a hardcore tech guy, right? How do you develop all of this business savviness?
So one lucky thing I have is that I have a business founder. So he has been in the industry for a very long time. So I get a lot of learnings from him. That is there. But right now, the main I would say difference that I have from my previous startup is because of two things. One is because at the rate at which the research community is moving. So about 3 hours of my day I spend every day reading the recent research papers, even the ones outside my
Wow.
domain. Because if someone has, like, for example, developed a new salt which improves their sauce, that salt may be useful in my juice as well. It may be very different topic, but it can help me, and it has in many cases. So that is something that I do, and people who are working in research in our company is something that they also practice to stay ahead of the research. And because earlier it was not this fast, the research field was moving, at least the
Right.
computer vision field was not moving at this rate.
Right.
But now, because of the investments and everything, it's a good thing.
But more to keep up with.
Yes, more to keep up with. And the second part is that I have a very top down and a critical approach towards the algorithms that I build, because what I have seen is that if you directly talk to your customers, then you understand your pain points and then you can build accordingly. Because you may be attached to an algorithm, but if it's not going to work, you need to let it go. If you fail fast, that's the best way. You will fail. I mean, even now, out of the 10,000 things we try, maybe one or two work. That is the rate. But the thing is
Crazy.
that those 10,000 things you have to let go as fast as you can. So you have to look at it very critically. I was not that critical, in my last startup. And what happens is that if you are not so critical, at a later stage, somewhere down the line, it will hit you back.
You'll have to pay for it.
Yeah, you have to pay for it. So it's better you do it much before.
Right.
And the rewards are really good if you do this and practice this.
Right. Oh, thanks so much for making time for this. Fun conversation, a lot of fascinating insights. And yeah, before we let you go, any books, podcasts, or resources that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
So if you are interested in AI, so there's a very old, and if you're someone who aspires to learn AI, so there's a very good pattern recognition course by Professor Shastri from IIC Bangalore, which is there somewhere in your YouTube. You have to find it. And the second one I would recommend is because there's so much hype regarding AI, it's also important to understand the nuances and the challenges there. There's a Lex Friedman podcast with Jan Lekan, the head of research at Facebook, which is, I think, 2 or 3 weeks earlier. That is also very interesting, where you can get a very one-by-one comparison between human intelligence and LLM intelligence.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much, Shubo, again, and all the best for everything that you have coming up. So look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, folks. If you like the content, don't forget to share, subscribe, do all of the good stuff. I will see you soon on another episode with another fantastic entrepreneur.